Okay guys, so today we're here to talk about The Last of Us 2. Okay, it's finally here. Now we're the only one in our family that have played it. Whoa! Holy sh! What was that? What was that? You feel that? Whoa! Oh my god. It's Thick Boy!
Oh shit!
Oh, big boy! Guys, today we thought we'd bring...
Damn, man! Oh shit!
Thickest of boys back on the couch. We know how much the audience loves him.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So
he's
bane of
back.
entitled gamers
back.
everywhere.
We're
He's
back.
back, guys.
We're
He's
back.
back.
Okay.
So I think, what's been happening, man? Why haven't you been on the show? What's been going on?
Nothing, eh? I just haven't got the call. That's all.
Ah, that's
Pretty
how it
much.
is.
No, they
That's
needed.
how it is.
This is The Last of Us 2 was. We've had some very spirited conversations about this game,
100%.
so I think it's good to have maybe a third party in this instance, so we
right.
can all discuss our thoughts. Some of us liked it, and
Some of us did not.
one of us didn't. So we will then discuss, and
After the break.
you can see what goes on. Yeah,
Here we go.
Alright, Last of Us 2. So, what do we think? By the way, if anyone's new to the show, Alex is actually our brother. We didn't actually say
This is
that.
Thick Boy. We've made numerous references to Thick Boy.
Correct.
Even
This
when he's
is-
not on the
this
show.
This is the merch. This is where it all started. Right
Yes.
here, right now. There's
first one, wasn't it?
There's two other.
Might have been the first one.
There's two other
It's the highest
brothers.
seller too.
There's two other brothers as well, but we'll get them on another time. Anyway, Last of Us 2, sequel to the critically acclaimed title. Last of Us 1 is remembered by many as the greatest game of the generation for PS3. It's one of the highest rated Metacritic games of all time. It just has that kind of like thing about it, right? I don't feel that way about it. I like it. I think it's a good game. It has a fantastic story, incredible voice acting and presentation.
Yeah.
But I didn't love the game because for me the gameplay just didn't really click with me, and the overall thing, it just didn't have that kind of like voodoo that it has in a lot of other people.
I think that I walked in and played The Last of Us 1 and I wasn't like overly wrapped. So I walked into this going, I'm not a huge fan of this. So I'm not walking in with this like rose-colored glasses
Sure.
of what I think Last of Us is. And let's just start with, well, what we thought of it. I actually liked it. Okay, let's start there. I did like it. I thought it was actually very good. And I was pleasantly surprised to finish the whole thing and go, cool, this is actually more than what I enjoyed this more than The Last of Us 1.
I think I enjoyed Last of Us 2 more, but I don't think it's as good as Last of Us 1, which might not make much sense, and we'll get into the details later. I think overall it was a very polished, enjoyable experience, but I think it was very uneven.
Yeah. I really hated this game. Like, I really did. It
can't wait
was
to
like
get it.
22 hours long, and I could not wait to be done with it within like the first 4 or 5 hours. Yeah, I can't sugarcoat it. Like, I just feel like I guess there's a lot of issues I have with this. The main issue is I feel like the movie game genre has evolved considerably since Naughty Dog crystallized it with The Last of Us, right? So they didn't invent movie games or cinematic games or whatever, but The Last of Us was this thing that all kind of brought it together in this little package, and you're like, oh, cool. And then Sony took that formula of like the movie game and then ran with it with like God of War and Horizon and like Days Gone and Spider-Man, and like obviously these are all very, very different games, but they have this kind of like movie game quality to them that I think they take from Naughty Dog, from like The Last of Us.
Yeah.
I think that space has evolved, and I don't think this game has evolved in the slightest. In fact, I think it's sort of somehow managed to have gone backwards in terms of its gameplay. It's just, you walk into big, beautiful levels, and you stealth around for a bit with some X-ray vision, and you kill some dudes or you don't, and then you move on to the next room. That's it. There's no environmental puzzles. There's no. There's not. There's like one time where I have to move a dumpster, another time where I have to move a ladder, another time where I have to move a plank.
I
That's
agree with
it.
you.
There's no environmental puzzles. There's no interesting ways to engage with those environments, that like manipulating environments. Like, the gameplay is exactly the same, except the animations are nicer and people say each other's names when they die. They're like, oh, they got Alex. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's a lot to... Okay, firstly, I do believe that the puzzle system was engaging in the way that, you know, you had to use ropes and, you know...
Throw a rope over a thing.
No, like in terms of like the actual rooms that you went into, it felt, as I said on the phone to you, very Half-Life, where it didn't actually show you immediately how to go into these next areas. And that was quite engaging because it did feel quite real, and to get from point A to point B, it was not a clear cut, that's a game, that's how to get there. You had to use a bit of imagination.
But I would actually say there weren't even that many puzzles.
There were none. They were
I'm not saying
there
there was a huge amount of puzzles, but there was enough, I think, to keep engaged. I didn't want to feel like it was a complete puzzle game. But at the same time, when I have to walk into a room and the door's locked and then I have to like use a rope to get over this and then the dumpster and whatever. Sure, they used a lot of the stuff time and time again.
Sure.
But again, I did not think that this was a puzzle game.
No, of course. But what I'm saying is, if you're like thinking about how to... So first of all, I have to say this. The environment design is some of the best I've ever seen. It is astoundingly good. The visuals of this game and the world, like the reclaimed Seattle, just overgrown and it's just
very realized.
It looks like Shadow of the Colossus. It's like, but 1,000 years earlier. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's on its way in terms of like that level of degradation, but also beauty. Incredible, right? Truly incredible. And also the actual level design functionally, in terms of spaces that you move through as video game levels, they feel very organic, very real. Like, you play The Last of Us 1, you're like, this is a video game level. There's some boxes over there that I'm gonna have to hide behind when the shooting starts, etc. These levels feel much more organic, and there very much is a challenge about like, hey, I need to get over there, and I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out, and there's maybe 3 or 4 ways to do it, and that's it, right?
Yeah, I think the highlight would be maybe, you know, when you descend the hotel.
Yeah, fantastic.
That was brilliant.
Fantastic.
That was a great
design.
space.
Fantastic level design.
Okay, so I think ultimately, yeah, as you're saying, it does have a beautifully realized world, but very limited scope with actually interacting with it.
Correct.
I would disagree with that because I think there's a lot of areas that you're going in, like particular types of, I don't know, you know, like there's skyscrapers and cranes and all these kind of like rapids happening around
But you can't interact with
that's the point.
They're
like,
really, they may as well be skyboxes.
Yeah.
No, but the thing is, you know, when you are walking across those things and you're looking down and you have to like battle through the rapids and jump over like broken cement bits between water, it does actually add to the world.
Yeah,
I do feel like you are interacting with that world.
That's really just platforming.
I agree. Like, look, I'm not saying...
But what's the difference between those things becoming barriers and not puzzles per se, but like barriers from A to B compared to a puzzle? Like, it's still part of the world that you have to traverse through. And for me, it was interesting. I actually thought it was quite good.
I'm not saying like, I'm not saying it's shit. I'm just saying like, I didn't find it engaging. I think there are lots of ways that you can engage a world, whether it's like traversal or puzzles or whatever, like lots of games, you know, Tomb Raider and what was it, the Jedi Fallen Order and all the Uncharted games and like God of War and lots of games give us examples of how you can make a space and then put up some roadblocks for players to have to push through. This game doesn't do that other than, hey, just figure out which way is a path to go through.
It's really only got three. It's only really got 2 puzzles really. There's ones involving dumpsters and getting them to climb above a high ground. And there are some ropes that you can grab. Long lines of rope that you throw over a pipe and you can hoist yourself up.
That's it.
And maybe a third one would be if you're in a house and there's a locked door, you've just got to search that house for a key. But I mean, they're all very superficial. So I agree with you.
But again, I don't think this game is it's not put to me as a, oh, this was going to be a puzzle game. I do think it's an addition to you going through the world.
But I mean, I think in Resident, look, this is survival horror, in kind of survival horror light. Resident Evil's puzzles are some of the highlights of the game.
For sure.
Not only are they interesting puzzles, but they break up the pacing, and I think moving on to pacing, that's another big issue this game has.
Oh man.
I did feel narratively exhausted by the end of it, only because I sat there and played so much of it in the span of 2 or 3 days. Like, I just smashed it out. If I did play it over 2 weeks or so, maybe I'd be more wanting to go on that journey more. But I did finish it and go, I did like what they did here. And in terms of the story itself, I did feel like, I think Druckmann and the team did sit there and go, what made the first one successful? Well, I think it was the story, it was the movie game that they made, and they wanted to do more of that. So in terms of that being their focus, I think that was their focus, to actually make it a story game.
It definitely was.
I feel like the problem with The Last of Us 2, in some instances, it's like, it's almost like if you wanted to tell a story and it was a TV show, it's like watching the same episode every time and then at the end being given a new episode. I think, you know, throughout the experience, and I agree with Ralph, I liked the game a lot, but I agree with Ralph that too often you were put into like basically a box and you need to go from here to here and you have to stealthily kill some enemies to get there.
That's it.
The big problem with that is that there is very little enemy variety, almost none.
Almost none.
There's basically one boss in the game.
There is just one.
There's one boss in the game.
Other than that, it's just either infected like the first game or human enemies like the first game.
Yeah.
Speckled between those encounters, there'll be like a chase sequence or like a
So essentially quick time events, and you have to sometimes press the square button when the cutscenes are happening.
yeah. So and I think those. I think if it was paced more evenly and if the game was shorter, it wouldn't have been as grating.
Yeah.
But I do think the game was a little bit long for what they actually put
100%.
into it.
Because also
it did get to be a bit repetitive, and I think by the end of the game, I was definitely playing it to know what happens.
I was just playing because I had to get it done.
I know.
I was so checked out.
I wanted to know what happened.
I feel like there's also like just a structural issue, which we can't really talk about in this non-spoiler review. But you know, the way it tells its story, it's not linear. Okay, I can tell you it jumps around. Okay,
Very Witcher-esque. It is. It's very Witcher TV show.
And so some people are going to love that. Personally, I felt as though huge sections of this game, massive sections of this game, were essentially non sequiturs or just tangential or just not interesting. There's a main story to be told here, and then the game spends a huge amount of time telling other stories that I just don't care about at all. No matter how much they want me to care, they desperately want me to care about these other stories. I don't care at all. I just don't. So that is another thing that exhausted me with this game.
I felt the same as you, but I feel the opposite. So the parts that you didn't like, I actually found to be more interesting than the main. Let's call it the main story. Or the one you'd expect, at least, I'll say.
I think what this game was trying to do in terms of its story, we won't go into what I think it was trying to achieve, but I think that those sections were important to understand and humanize some more of those characters and get to know them more. And I do look at this story compared to The Last of Us 1. I think it was more intricate. The time periods are a little bit more complex, fine. And some of it, sometimes I got a bit confused, actually. I was like, where are we exactly right now in the events that have unfolded? Sometimes I wasn't entirely sure because it did jump around so much. And I agree with you on that. But I do think that it all had a purpose that at the end of the game I was like, cool, I understand why that happened and why we went on those adventures because I understood those characters more and I empathized with them more, and it was all just building that character and that depth up, and it worked in some ways, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand how some people would enjoy that. Obviously, you guys have. I just felt no connection to many players in this story, and massive chunks of this story just felt like a huge waste of time to me. They were also just sometimes really poorly delivered. I think at a very fundamental level, I am so not bought into the writing of this game. Like, I actually really liked the writing of The Last of Us 1. Like, as I said, don't love that game, but the writing is top shelf, top tier. I think this writing here is so bad. Like, it's just so much suffering porn. It's like, if you just make everyone suffer all the time, it's got to be deep, right? And it's like, no, it's just not. Like, it doesn't construct itself in a way that you are actually bought into those moments of suffering. You don't really care about what's happening when terrible shit is going down, because I don't think they did enough to build those characters out in the right way. It's just one thing after the other where you're just rolling your eyes. Like, really? Are you really going to make that decision after all this? Are you really going to do that? Especially towards the end of the game, man. Can't spoil it, but like, I was laughing out loud at some of the decisions these characters were making because it was so unbelievable and so impossible to relate to those decisions. I was like, how has this been written this way?
The last 2 hours were pretty weak.
Oh, man.
It definitely...
I was exhausted by the end of that.
It doesn't finish on a bang.
I would even say,
whimpers.
I would even say that the last 2 hours actually undo the first 20 hours of this game. That's how bad it is,
I agree with that, but I still enjoyed it on the whole.
Sure.
My feeling of the game being extremely uneven is in all aspects. So I think... the gameplay and the pacing is extraordinarily uneven. I think the story is also very uneven in a lot of instances. I think that the unevenness of the story is definitely there. I think the writing is pretty good.
I would say it's
personally. I think the writing.
I bought into it.
I feel like the way characters were, delivering lines, what they were saying, it was at least portrayed believably. I agree with you that some of the courses of action that they take were not believable.
Yeah.
And I think it actually went completely against what you know to be of the characters.
For sure.
And what their motivations would be. And even just...
Without selling that difference. Because it's okay if they do something unexpected or different,
Yes.
but you need to sell it. You need to be like, why'd you do that?
It's like a Game of Thrones Season 8 in some instances.
Yes.
It's trying to subvert your expectations.
This game is Game of Thrones Season 8.
In very cheap and unearned ways.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't set up the payoffs like it should.
No way.
I recognize that, but I also look past it, and I just enjoyed it for what it was. I just enjoyed the ride.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about the pew pew? Sam, did you like the guns?
I actually thought that the guns did feel. I know I'm saying everything positive. Well, there's a lot of things I am agreeing with in terms of things they could work on, but the guns themselves felt fine for what this was trying to do. I mean, I said this before. Like, if they're reviewing GTA, are they really going to spend a lot of time on talking about the guns? The Last of Us 2 isn't about the gunplay so much as about the story. Having said that, it did feel fine for what it was trying to do.
Fine.
I would agree.
Fine.
There you have it. Like, that's the endorsement.
No, but like,
here's
that's
the
the thing. I mean, when you play, I don't know, yeah, when you play again like GTA or something, or you play Destiny, like you're there for the gun mechanics in that world. This, you're not there for the gun mechanics. You're there pretty much for the world and the story.
I would agree with you, and to counter you, I would agree with you if you weren't spending 15 hours in combat.
For sure.
You know,
You're not spending a lot.
You are spending so much time in
most
combat
of that
in this
game is traversing the environments and
Yes.
combat encounters.
Yes.
And I think that the combat is serviceable.
Sure.
I would say it almost broaches good. So the first act of this game is absolutely atrocious in my opinion.
That's so bad.
Not only because it stumbles along through the story, but the combat actually just feels terrible. I think the combat in this game is completely dependent on the variety of kit that you get later in the game. You know, different weapons, different traps, all that sort of thing. I think in the start of the game, where you've just really got a pistol, the combat shows itself to be very average. I never liked Uncharted because of its combat, and the way Naughty Dog obviously builds their shooting mechanics and systems is in the same vein, because I think it handles terribly.
And I feel like the difficulty curve of this game really feels like they just put you in rooms with more zombies. And they put you, and that annoyed me, especially when they're grabbing you and shit like that. And like, I know that there's certain weapons and stuff that can aid you in that, or consumables. But it was a bit annoying.
I think in defense of the combat, like it's meant to be a realistic experience, right? So you're not meant to be like MLG 360 no scope headshots from whatever. You're not meant to be like God of War Kratos with axes just messing shit up. Like, it's meant to have this kind of realistic vibe. And I think when the combat does work, it's like when you're kind of making decisions. Do I stealth a bit here and I get spotted? Okay, what do? Do I try and hide again, or do I go all out, right? And can I shoot my way through this, or can I just run? The combat gives you a lot of freedom to do things.
And it reminded me of Phantom Pain in many respects.
For sure.
You're given basically a set, and you need to find out how you want to attack that.
Correct.
Whether it's stealthy, whether it's guns are-blazing, all that sort of thing.
But it just doesn't really ever evolve. Like, imagine if Metal Gear Solid's entire framework never really changed throughout the entire duration of the game. In terms, like, your kit gets a little bit better, of course, but other than that, the enemies are the same. It just feels the same in a way that the other stealth games don't. As I said, the moment-to-moment decision-making you can make is great, and all paths work. You can run, you can stealth, you can fight, but none of them really like keep me engaged that, I want to continue. Another room of enemies. Oh, great. I really missed doing this. I'm so glad all the cutscenes are over, and now I'm back to this stuff. I never, ever thought that, ever.
I think my biggest problem with the combat is that all those methods of attacking those scenarios that you mentioned, none of them felt especially viable. I feel like you couldn't really effectively be stealthy.
Correct.
You couldn't really effectively combat people head on. You couldn't really effectively do melee. And I think the issue is I don't really like the stealth mechanics. I don't think they were built well.
No.
That's number one. And I think the big problem with if you want to take a guns a blazing approach is that you simply don't have enough ammo in the game to do that. And so I think the game feigns difficulty by merely restricting the resources that you have. There's nothing more frustrating than having a pistol that only has 12 shots in it, and then walking through 20 rooms not being able to pick up pistol ammo because you can't pick it up.
I do. Look, I do think that there was a lot of moments where I'm like, okay, I am out of ammo, right? But there was always ammo somewhere. Like, it actually felt quite easy to find ammo. If you just looked left and right, you'd find something.
Even then, I feel like that's a design intent to say, look, we're not going to give you lots of ammo. It's not meant to be about that. They want you, and I actually feel like the ammo economy in this game is one of its highlights, because I'm like, it does force me to balance stealth versus running versus combat. Like, you know, you need to keep those things in tension with each other, otherwise it all falls apart.
And it makes you explore.
But I feel like
Correct.
that's the only aspect that feeds into the difficulty of this game. And then the combat encounters.
but also
I think that's
just-
the only part that makes combat encounters hard is the restriction of resources.
Like,
Yeah,
if you
I
think
wouldn't
about
say
the
it's-
boss, the boss was only hard because there wasn't enough ammo.
Yeah, the boss, man.
was
Wait,
it.
See, I found the boss really easy.
Well, I didn't...
Because you might have heaps of ammo before you walked in. We
Maybe,
didn't,
maybe.
you know.
Look, either way, I think we should do final thoughts. I'll go first because I'm the negative one on this. I really dislike this game. I'm sure that most other people, because I read all the previews, by the way, for this game.
Yeah.
Every preview was so glowing. So many people saying it's game of the year in the making, whatever. I'm not saying they're wrong, okay? I'm not saying if you love this game, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't like it at all. I feel like this genre or this style of game has evolved considerably, and I don't feel this game has evolved one iota in terms of its actual gameplay formula. Its level design is incredible, but other than that, that's it. But I think from a structural perspective, a story perspective, I think this game is so weak. It is so much weaker than Last of Us 1. It's just, as I said, I liked Last of Us 1, didn't love it. I actively dislike this. That's my take.
I think that I know that this was not a perfect game, but I walked in there thinking, okay, this is going to be a very story-driven, world-building experience. And I think that I do feel like this was a more intricate, complex, more engaging story for me, at least. I enjoyed that. I didn't expect a lot in terms of combat and all that kind of stuff, and I wasn't disappointed in that regard. So I think it might have been... It's how I've actually approached this game, and I've enjoyed it, to be honest. I think a lot of people are going to play this and think it was actually a good experience. I don't think that many people, regardless of what they think of the story or whatever, are going to look at this and go, this was a sloppy job. I just don't think it's a sloppy job.
No one will say it's sloppy.
Exactly. I think it's still an accomplished piece of work.
It is
and
extraordinarily polished, yes.
Exactly.
Extremely polished.
And I think that, Druckmann and the team definitely, put a lot of effort into this, and I think it shows, personally.
So I really liked The Last of Us 1, but I didn't like the gameplay at all. I really didn't like the gameplay at all. I kind of feel... with The Last of Us 2, I liked the gameplay a little bit more in that it did a lot more to vary the pacing in some places. The problem is that it actually stretches out your playtime by about 10 hours. And so all the strides they make in varying the pacing, whether it's, as I said, a chase sequence or things like that without giving anything away, it makes a lot of strides, but by protracting the game length by about 10 hours, it ends up just feeling so extraordinarily uneven that it really is peaks and troughs throughout the entire game. On the whole, I really enjoyed it, but you can't help but recognize that it is, I think, deeply flawed in many respects.
In a way that Last of Us 1 was not.
Correct, because
not at all.
It was just more succinctly packed up, and whether you liked it or not, it was in there. But with The Last of Us 2, it's basically double the length. My playthrough was 22 to 23 hours, and you're really doing a lot of the same things that you did in number 1.
Yeah.
Just for longer.
Yeah, with characters that you may or may not be bought into. That's the other thing.
Yes.
So you'll experience that for yourself. Anyway, guys.
Non-spoiler review.
This is a non-spoiler review. We're going to do...
a spoiler review,
I think a week from now, when the game is actually released, we'll do a full spoiler review, which is actually what we're going to record now, but we're just going to have it on ice. So...
Yes. We're going to record it when it drops, of course.
You should put your Back to the Future hat on, actually.
Good idea.
Time travel.
All right, guys. Good luck in the comment section.
Bye.
Zip up.